You're listening to The Rich Life Revolution with me, Michelle Cooper. My mission is to empower you to step into your next level of wealthy. You'll hear all the deets, a little bit of inspiration, and real life takeaways so that you can create your own rich life revolution. Let's dig in. Hey there, welcome to episode 34 with my guest Sara Spada, where we are talking about the transformative nature of death, how we can lean into legacy. If you've ever experienced loss of a relationship, a loved one, or even a career dream, this episode is for you. Today, I'm speaking with Sara Spada, a life and leadership mentor who works with people in the process of evolution and awakening. Over the years, she has been a great pillar during changes in my life, and I'm so grateful to share our conversation with you. We explore the impacts of death and loss, both positive and negative, and dig into how embracing both our own and others' legacies can be a transformative practice in living in the moment. It may sound weird to embrace the transformation of death, but that is exactly what we need to do to move through the process. This may sound like a Debbie Downer episode, but I promise you it's not. It is truly a gift to you and a lasting legacy for transformation. Sara is the founder of The Rhythm School, a leadership development world that breaks all the rules, a space that runs counterculture to a world obsessed with outer mastery. They help energetically oriented, rising mentors and leaders to experience that inner mastery, which equals radical world change. They help them discover somatic, energetic, and personal mastery and show them how to alchemize their greatest sufferings into power. They create transformational methodologies and pathways for their clients and ignite levels of magnetism and manifestation that defy the imagination. I am so excited to share this conversation with you. Let's dive in. Hey, girl, how are you?
I'm good. Really good.
So, for our listeners, Sara is one of my greatest friends. We have known each other for many years now. We've shared lots of different crazy life journeys and definitely in a way a ride or die for me. Somebody I can always call. I could always land on her doorstep if I needed to, as could she mine. And we have gone through some quite serious life things together. Not like beside each other kind of thing, holding each other's hand, but the experience of significant life shifts while we have a friendship and, even supporting each other in our different businesses and stuff like that. And so I really wanted to bring you on because in a conversation that we were having as friends, we were talking about these significant things that happen in our life that in the moment are like you're rock bottom. You're like, how could it get any worse than this? Or like, I'm going to shut down. I can't cope. Or, those on your knees times that we all have. And then we make it through. We get to the other side of the intensity of it. And also, you add in a sprinkle of time. Some time goes by. We're not as reactive and we're able to see the gold. So I think that when our listeners are going through change and transformation and shifting in all kinds of forms and areas, it can be hard in the moment. And even for me, right? Like right now, I'm going through a shift in my business that is like, oh, feels like somebody's like digging a knife into me.
The friction is real. Yeah. The heat is on.
Yeah. And so I think, some of your experiences and your stories are really valuable to share. And so can you tell our listeners, just give them a little synopsis of Sara and what you do and how you came to this place in your life.
Oh my god, the ultimate feet to the fire question for me, right? As you know, because 'cause I'm such a Jane of all trades, like, I've worn so many hats over the years. I was thinking about that dropping into today because I'm rarely in the spotlight and kind of having to preface it. Really, I'm a life and leadership mentor, as you know. I work with a vast scope of humans that are in some form of evolution or awakening. Everything from, caregivers and teachers and mothers, that's really at the forefront of the space that I hold, all the way to visionary change makers. Really, it ends up being people who are either holding space for or really in a leadership position for or on the slight edge of creating world change, whether that's world like in an intimate place or it's world in a generational place in a family or it's world, in terms of really standing for something different for a community or for a collective. So even in saying that, right, it sounds so vast. I'm just really someone who wants to I always want people to feel like life is deeply happening for them, like their lived experience, their past is being translated into their future as wisdom, not warning. Like if we get right down into the heart of what I believe in and what I'm passionate about and what I would ride or die for, it's that is the lived experience is so rich with awakening and strength and growth and change for ourselves and also for the world. Like I just will go to my own grave loving that. So that's kind of who I am from a professional place. And obviously, I'm a solo mom of teen boys. So that keeps me hopping and all the things, all the things. That's a whole rabbit hole to itself.
So I will share with everybody. I think that Sarah's being just a little humble
Oh, yeah.
because you have amazing gifts, intuitive gifts. She's like the queen of numerology and human design and astrology and all those things wrapped into one. I've learned so much over the years from you in all these areas, mindset, everything. I just love, your history of birth support of like it's so being someone who's given birth 3 times, I can relate to the traveling of that journey and how that actually relates into our everyday lived experience. And I love that you reference that because we're birthing new ideas, we're birthing businesses, we're birthing new relationships. There's something that's happening at all times in our lives in different areas.
Totally. I think my clients, they laugh about that the most, that the roots of being a birth and death doula for such a long time, which is just my first language. And I actually quite often now work with men who are wanting to evolve their consciousness and their relationship to sensitivity and intuition and relationships, and also working with like younger humans who are wanting to understand how to be kind of awakened in the spectrum of their bigger life. And I'm using birth analogy all the time with them. And I'm like, talking to the dudes and they don't know anything about it. I'm like, let me tell you.
Let me tell you about the Ring of Fire.
Your greatest power. Let me tell you about Ring of Fire and how your greatest power can be found through, touching in on childbirth. But they dig it. It works pretty much for anyone. Yeah. Even the most dudest of dudes, but they get it in the end.
We need more of those men in the world.
They're there. They're there. I love so deeply the evolutions I'm seeing in men, especially because I'm raising men, and having been on the other side of relationships with men where, all the Me Too's and all of that, I've experienced like the full spectrum. So getting to hold space for men in this way that are really curious about their personal evolution. Yeah, I love it so much. I can't wait to see it take more of a forefront or more visibility in the world.
So, a few years ago now, you had an experience in your family, which I think many of us can relate to, which, in our conversation, we talked about our lowest points are sometimes our greatest evolution.
Yeah, our greatest sufferings are our greatest power. Like when we can embrace it as such. It was 2018. So pre-world, world whatever, we've been going through all the things. And my mom got sick. We kind of knew it. I had an intuitive sense of it ahead of time. All the modalities that I use with you and with other people were kind of pointing at certain patterns of kind of death and evolution coming in the nearer future. I was having sort of dreams and things like this. And even we had sort of like an interesting experience with my sister, my mom and I, and there was kind of like this death was in the air in a certain way. And right after that, she got sick. She developed cancer. She had lung cancer. And in the beginning, it's like so many people go through it, right? You're in this sort of mechanical role with it as we're going through tests and discovery and, what is this really? And, all of the human things that we would go through. But we always had a sense very quickly that it was going to move differently, like move more quickly than what the world might say it was going to do. So she was diagnosed with cancer in the early 2019. And then about 8 weeks later, she passed.
That's fast.
Yeah, it's super fast. I refer to it as wildfire. I think because I'd seen it and sensed it coming, it felt more familiar when it did arrive, but it was really fast. It was by the time we got to the, conversations with the oncologist, right, which is tends to be like the last conversation you have. He said, maybe she's got 3 to 6 months to live, and she died 2 weeks later. So, yeah, like really, really quick. So I'm not alone in that experience, whether like death comes for all of us. Sometimes it's sudden and unexpected, sometimes it's long and awaited and all of the things. So, yeah, it was, but the way we went through it is just really, really quick.
And you and your sister and your mom actually went through this quite intentionally as well.
We did. I think because of the role and the space that I hold and the perspectives that I hold around just energetics and embracing life experience, like really taking like really getting into the lived experience as generatively as possible. Like regardless of what I ever go through or whatever I hold space for other people going through, it's always like, well, why is this happening for us? Death is inevitable in so many forms. So I kind of held that role. And my sister and my mom were all really connected. We'd been through so much together that there was not really a ton left to be said or unpacked or sort of healed. Like we really just saw it for what it was. This is happening. And how can we create the most loving, spacious, welcomed death as possible for her? Like knowing it was going to be, we were going to need grit and tears and friction and all the things that death asks of us, knowing that that was part of the deal, we chose to wrap our arms around that and say, well, how can this just be the most spacious thing that we can go through? Partly for our kids as well, because there are grandkids around and all of that. Did that answer your question?
Totally, totally. And so you moved through this pretty quickly. Obviously, it's a deeply emotional journey. It takes some time. I think, it's Steve Jobs who says we can only connect the dots looking backwards. Now that you reflect on that and the kind of, let's call it the aftermath of that, because you did have some stuff come up, right? That was kind of difficult to deal with your dad and,
Yeah, I mean, in the moment, because I love that phrasing, can only connect the dots back afterwards. Yes, I resonate with that. And I think there's a way, and I really dig into ways of deepening the lived experience as it's occurring. So, of course, death brings destruction on certain levels, right? There's a reorganization of the way that I lived my life, based on the fact that my mom was gone. We don't have a ton of family around. There was reorganization in the way that my sister and I operated together. But on a deeper level, it unearthed some major family patterns with my relationship with my father. And I often say, actually, that year, was the year that I lost both parents, one by death and one by decision. So that was a major thing that we went through, and the death of my mom, the physical death of my mom opened the pathway for a lot of unearthing and healing related to that. Also, because of the nature of her death and how quickly it occurred, I had suspended my life. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go on a sabbatical to take care of my mom for the next year." While she passed, and seeing that she passed so quickly, I was like, "Well, I guess I've got this year now, and who takes a sabbatical at 40 or 45 or however old I was? Like, that was out of the ordinary, but I was thinking, like, I just had to do it. So we had all this space and time, and my sister and I went on a sort of pilgrimage to go and spend time with all of my mom's community and friends, because she's from a number of different places. And so we took our kids and we kind of, pilgrimed around or gypsied around for the next 6 months to these different places throughout BC. Part of which one place was a place where I'd experienced sexual violence as a young woman. So going back into that place, and we can talk about that absolutely, but it was like, I don't know if we have space and time here to get into all of that. But the catalyst of my mom's death and the resulting time and space and the pilgrimage my sister and I were on put me back into this physical position of this space that I'd been in and experienced such trauma from, which had ultimately shaped my life in powerful ways, as you might imagine. Put me back into this space where I had this really crazy healing experience. It was like it was a real teaching of sometimes healing patterns take a few minutes to right themselves. Sometimes they take a few years and sometimes they take 30. So it was this whole thing is like, this is where it gets so paradoxical. And I love paradox because it's like, even in situations, like a parent's death that I was so close to, how could I possibly see that year as the greatest year of my life? It is absolutely true. I look back on it now and I'm like, that is the year of my greatest transformation, because the catalyst of her death, however gritty and sad and grieving it was, created a healing vortex of 30 years, and I'm a completely different person. It created the power that I needed to really decide how to stand differently in a relationship with my other parent, you know, those types of things. So I'm probably not answering your question in a lot of different ways.
Well, I just think it's so, the death of a parent, like, I've lost both my parents. My mom passed away when I was 9, so that's a whole different scenario, right? But when my dad died, I was 28, and I always say it was that year after was the year I felt I wandered the planet lost. I felt completely untethered, which can be good. There was some really good things that came out of that. But I felt like I was just wandering, like looking for something. I didn't even know what I was looking for. And we can have those experiences. We can have, in that transformation, the burning down of certain things in your life, or structures in your life, or relationships in your life. And it's kind of like that phoenix rising, right? Like there's through this death is this rising of, perhaps I see it as an opportunity for a different version of yourself. We can come to terms with some things that, like you did, trauma, perhaps, or relationships. I'm going through that right now, right? Like my brother has terminal cancer, and there's things that are coming up. Like there's childhood things that are coming up. He's 14 years older than me. My other brother is 16 years older than me. And there's still stuff coming up from all of our childhood, because my brother is dying of cancer. So he's coming to terms with his own stuff, and it's giving the rest of us an opportunity to examine and look at these things as well.
Totally. And you can feel in there like how like I see death as such a galvanizing force. It's like leaves no stone unturned, either in emotional and spiritual ways or physical ways or generational ways. Like it really does do that for us. The biggest like awareness that I learned slash kind of really deepened into during that year, and I believed it already because of the years I spent holding space for birth and death. But really in that year, it became so like potent for me is that death is love, death is healing, death is all of these things because of what a powerful force it is in our lives. And if we can embrace that in a physical way with people who physically die in our lives, then we can do so with death in all the other ways that it's helping us evolve forward. It unearths the past so that we can integrate it and heal from it and plant it forward into our future as wisdom. Like that is such a powerful thing. So I love that you and your brothers and like you're really seeing it for what it truly is.
Totally, totally. So it feels weird to say this, but at some point in our conversation previously, I think you had said like, the year your mom passed was the worst and best year.
Oh yeah. Well, so like a year later after this whole thing had come down, and I, by the way, totally resonate with the wandering feeling. I think that there's other parts to that year and to the death experience that really instigate us to kind of rise up into a different form of legacy. And my sister and I both, and I'm not trying to speak for her, but I know we both sort of we feel this. There was kind of like an orphan vibe for a little while
Oh, totally.
because you're kind of off the tether of the legacy that has been created for you.
I remember, oh my God, I remember my brother Gary said to me, we were sitting there, we bought this tree for my dad and stuff, and then we took his ashes out into the ocean where my dad had scattered my mom's ashes. I didn't even know that place existed. But you know what's funny is I spent a lot of time right at that place, like on the land side of it, not in the water. It's in West Vancouver. It's Lighthouse Point, and I didn't even know that's where my mom's ashes were.
Oh, amazing.
I used to go there all the time. So I just think that's so like it's one of those kind of weird, crazy things, right? But we had scattered my dad's ashes there, and my brother said, he looked at me, we had rented this little boat, right? And he said, "So now we're orphans." And I was like, "Oh my God." And like, I had like this image, like little orphan Annie kind of thing, right? I was 28. I wasn't a little kid anymore, but still. And then I thought about, the archetype of the orphan. And I was like, what's the meaning in that? But for me, it would have been a different experience if I had known more about myself. I had more self awareness. I had known more about like spirituality, and I was more kind of connected to source. It would have been a different experience. For me, it turned into a living, continuing, or maybe ramping up of living recklessly and feeling very untethered and wandering the planet. I just went from country to country and did whatever I felt like doing.
Which you're still kind of doing, aren't you? Maybe
Totally.
that's just how you roll. Maybe that integrated
Totally. It's
elsewhere.
my brothers always say, like, my mom had gypsy blood, and they always say, like, "You're just a gypsy, just like mom. Like, you can't pin you down."
One of the most beautiful things I've ever, and partly because it was in this moment in this year, and it was from my mom and to my kids. My children were much younger at the time, and they were asking her, but my kids and my sister's kids, they're all really inquisitive. They're very close to my mom. And so they were asking lots of questions about death and what do you believe and how do you feel and what's going to happen. And we actually were all together when she died. So we were able to create a space at home for her to go by choice, like to go on her own timing. So the kids were there in the backyard and all this thing. Anyway, one of my sons said, what do you believe about where you go and what do you believe about death? And my mom was never hugely spiritual person or religious person. In fact, she and I kind of met in the middle while she was passing away. And she said, I don't know. I believe really that I get folded back into the earth. Like I just turn to dirt, like I get buried away and all of that. She said, but the one thing I do believe is that all the things about who I am and what I believe and all the love that I have flows out from me and into you and pass that forward. And it was such a simple, beautiful sentiment, obviously, to pass on to a child from a grandmother. It was beautiful to witness. And it also just it's so powerful for me to tag back into that because it speaks so loudly into the kind of the legacy, the role of legacy that we all have in carrying forward the love and the healing even, because not all parent-child relationships are healthy, but, we are on the slight edge of our legacy, I guess is my point, regardless of what that legacy needs to do, and also, there are things like we carry DNA from one to another. There are things about your mom's existence that exist in you now, and maybe through death that becomes more clear or more, more alive, all of that. But just as we were talking, I remembered that was such a beautiful thing that came up.
That is such a beautiful sentiment, and, like, I just would have started crying my eyes out probably in watching that, but it's so, so powerful, and I love that you bring up legacy. What do you feel is your mom's legacy?
Oh, that's a great question. That'll make me cry for sure. My mom was so simple in many ways. She was just a really good human. Like, right before she died, she had retired, and she was a realtor for a long time, and she ended up going back and getting training to be and I can't remember the name of it, but to be basically like a mediator in family court, and to go back and to actually work between people who have had misdemeanors or things like that, or like a reconciliation, somebody. So she'd gone and done that. She was just a really simple, beautiful example of, like, a good citizen, if that makes sense. She was a good friend to many. She gave back to the community in many ways. She was kind of like a quiet leader in many ways. I didn't really know that until she died, because then on our pilgrimage and getting around town where she lived, and we went to the coffee shop where she went, and people just adored her and the feelings that she carried around, and she had this saying how, there's always blue sky somewhere. So even in the depths of, like, conflict in our family in the younger years or whatever, she's like, "Oh, there's blue sky." Like, she was always somebody who would just kind of look for the simple piece of things, and for me, that's the legacy that she's leaving. Yeah, we just get around and we do the best we can as we can until we know better, and then we do different. Especially for someone like me who's always trying to be, like, the brazen slight edge of something something. She's just like, yeah, she just goes for a walk every day, and she goes with the girls to the gym, but she left a massive legacy of community love, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, and I think that that's part of us all creating our rich life, right? Is like, what is our legacy gonna be? I know for me, my brother's passing away, and he has a beautiful piece of property, and I've got lots of ideas of what we can do with it. But what I did say to him really recently is like, this is a legacy, and I'm not willing to let it go. So as long as I'm alive and my kids are alive, it will stay in our family. I can't guarantee, obviously, after my kids, who knows? They'll be somewhat disconnected, right, from their great uncle Gary kind of thing, that ornery old fisherman guy. But I think we all get to decide what our legacy is, whether that's a tangible piece of property or money or whatever, to how we want to be remembered. Like, what do people say at our funeral?
Totally. And my mom would say, and I carried this forward, is like, what are her great-great-grandchildren gonna say about her? I come from a family that has, like, a really strong legacy of accomplishment. I've got, like, war heroes, and my one of my great-grandfathers basically built Vancouver, like, fair amount of that kind of going on. So there's stories trickling down from great-grandparents all the way through, some great stories, some not so great, and I feel like legacy is, like, what are our grandkids gonna say about us? What story are they carrying forward? And, it's like so much in the world has that in negative ways or in unhealed ways, but I'm gonna strive to be one that leaves a legacy that's still talked about, even if it's in quiet circles.
Totally, totally. Like, I think it's like when my dad was passing away, it was an opportunity for me to ask all the questions I had never asked, even the questions I didn't even know that I wanted to ask. And I got some answers I didn't want. But I'm doing the same thing with my brother now because my brothers they were older. So they weren't around our house. I didn't have that traditional sibling relationship with them. But what I have learned is my brother Gary was very protective of me. I didn't know that. And I was like, oh, like very, very protective. And that to me is interesting because that was going on and I wasn't even aware of it. And I see it show up in his interactions with my kids. And so I'm like, oh, that's what that is. So I think it's really interesting and I see it as an opportunity. Like I felt incredibly blessed that I had that time with my dad. I had 6 months almost to the day. I'm on the 3rd year, right? We were told 2 years with my brother and I'm on the 3rd year and he's still going.
He's
Like
still
he's out
kicking.
chopping a tree down today. So like who knows, right? But I see it as an opportunity when we're given this kind of foreshadowing. And we like the whole piece about legacy, I think is so, so valuable for us to consider.
Yeah, it highlights what you were saying before, the idea of, when we go through something, all the dots come together afterwards. And what we're talking about now is actually moving through these times of great suffering or what are quote unquote considered to be great suffering. And rather than doing so with not necessarily blinders on, but doing so with a narrow view of what it can offer, is to actually move through an experience like that with a great trust that there's so much available, more than what we can see and touch. Life is deeply happening for us on so many levels, and so we can move through a 3-year experience with or 5 with your brother or an 8-week with mine or 4 hours if we hear like, even if somebody dies suddenly and we have that unfinished business feeling, there's so much richness in that to heal and stitch together stories and keep a relationship alive, and there's just so much as we go through it. So that's just what I had the foresight with my mom to kind of feel and welcome the experience as it was happening, but I see it all the time. That's why I love doing what I do. I see it all the time with people who are moving through divorce, who are moving through not divorce, who are moving through really deep personal healing, who are moving through massive death within their business. Is like, how can we move through it with eyes and heart and soul wide awake so that the evolution on the other side is just as rich as the experience itself. And that's legacy, really.
For sure. And the one thing I did learn in my divorce process is that us coming to terms, let's call it coming to terms with a situation or moving through a situation, the other person actually doesn't have to be involved because it's actually not about them, it's about us. And that was the biggest teacher in my divorce process, and it's not like he wasn't involved because he was, but the processing of it and the transformation of it for me didn't require me to be communicating and telling him, "This is how it is," or "This is how I feel," or "This is what you've done," or "This is" like, it was my internal process. I could talk to him, he didn't need to be there. And that taught me so much because I realized If I could do that, I could do that with any situation in my life. So I could talk to the people I felt hurt by in the past. They didn't need to be in front of me. And like you've helped me with that. I have a great friend, Darcy, who's helping with that as well, to actually go back to these moments and tell people how we felt in those moments, not how they made us feel, because I don't feel that people can make you feel anything. It's like, this is how I'm feeling right now in this situation. And that was like a game changer.
Total game changer, hey?
I can tell anybody anything now, like, doesn't matter. And I totally let go of like needing to convince people that I was right or that my feelings were valid or like any of that, right? It was like, no, I actually don't need to tell you all about how I'm feeling and what's going on for me because of your decision. I get to have my experience and you can have your experience of it. And I'm going to use this, even though it might not be what I prefer, I'm going to use this as part of my transformation.
Totally. Well, I went through a divorce in a similar manner. Eyes wide awake, mind wide awake, same kind of idea. And what I love about that is the ultimate paradox again is by doing that, then, by that deep inner mastery piece, which is the term I use, but like that deep inner anchoring of our own experience, then the experience itself becomes something entirely different than what the world would expect. I still get eyes rolling when I say, I'm still best friends with my ex-husband, which is true. We just like death, right? We just evolve the way we live together in the world, but the love and the friendship is as strong, if not stronger than it ever was, because we both focused on the richness of our own experience as we went through it. And then the experience itself was, well, not so bad.
Well, and a couple of days ago would have been my 23rd wedding anniversary. And I sent a text message to him and I was like, happy wedding anniversary day. And he was like, this feels weird, Michelle, right? Like, we're not married anymore. We're divorced. I'm like, yeah, but the thing is, you can't just erase the thing that happened. Like, it still happened. It was an important day. It's been an important day for like 20 years or whatever. It might not be an important day to our kids, but it's significant in our family, right? Like, we can acknowledge it. I don't want to pretend it doesn't exist. It's a really special day. Do I want to be married to you anymore? No. But if this still happened, it was funny because I was at the butcher and he loves spicy things and they had this like small batch hot sauce stuff or whatever, right? And I was like, oh, I'll get that for him. And I sent him a picture of it. I said, I got you this. Happy wedding anniversary. And he's like, again? Feels weird. I don't know what to do right now, but okay, right? Okay, Michelle, I'll let you do you, right? And I'm like, woo!
Sometimes when I'm on like my fifth phone call to my ex-husband, he's like, I don't think we're supposed to be talking this much. Like, this is getting weird. Yeah, I talk to you more now than I ever did when we were married. Like, yeah,
That's like me and Nick, right? Like we don't FaceTime all the time, but probably more than we actually communicate more now than we did when we were married. So there's the evolution, right? And I think it's a really great, again, like comes back to legacy. It's a great legacy for our kids to see, both of us, your kids and my kids, to see that the ending of a marital relationship doesn't mean the ending of the whole relationship. It doesn't have to be this crazy drama. I'm not saying that that's possible in every situation, but it doesn't have to be that way. And like, full disclosure, there were crazy drama moments and there was very reactionary emotional times, but at the same time, I think it was really amazing for my kids to see that it didn't look like their friend's divorce, like their friend's parents' divorce. And we still have a relationship.
Yeah, there's a freeing of it, like, with my mom's passing, but also with anything, I would say, like, death allows for a different tone of freedom than we would allow than if something was kind of contained as it's supposed to be, like a life, the relationship I have with my mom is still alive and well, and there's so much still that goes on, and then in marriage, like, in the world these days, we're seeing such a breakdown of construct, especially in marriage, and yeah, what a gift to pass on to our kids, which just to show them that sometimes death is important in order to provide the freedom for individuals to go and be the happiest that they can be or be the healthiest or be the whatever, you know? Try and keep things in a box doesn't always work out well in the end.
Totally. So here's the thing that just came popped into my head that I think is great to talk about really quickly. I want to get your insight. So, like, you know me, I'm always like manifesting my next experience or thing or whatever it is, right? And there has been a part of me that has gone into guilt because wanting to manifest, let's say, an amazing property or $1 million. Okay, so let's say manifest $1 million. That actually wasn't on my vision board and stuff. It wasn't $1 million, but it was incredible wealth with ease. And then I get told, your brother's dying of cancer and you're his sole heir. And I'm going to inherit $1 million property pretty easily. And I'm like, ooh, that doesn't feel good. And I know I'm not like this magical being that's wielding the will of the universe into my thing, right?
You
But
aren't?
like, right?
Isn't that what they're all supposed to be learning? Yeah? Manifestation?
I'm co-creating, I get it. But there was a part of me, I think, and this happens to people. I see it with people that I coach. They decide they want this thing, they want to bring this experience into their life, and it comes in a way they didn't even see, expect, couldn't foresee, and maybe doesn't feel like it's the way they'd want it to happen. So you can go into guilt and shame and feel kind of crappy. How do you work through that? What are your thoughts on
Oh my god, that's a lot of thoughts.
that? Right?
Well, the first thing I would say is that I know that feeling because part of my mom's legacy was a monetary one. Like, there was a really beautiful thing that she paid forward from previous generations. And I remember intimately the feeling of guilt and shame about being excited about that. Like, it was like a life-changing amount of money, and it allowed for so much that year and it allowed for so much still. And yeah, there was guilt in the moment about that. It's like, how can I be excited for this at the expense of my mom's life? And then I would think about what my mom would say about that. She held it, she grew it for this reason, for us to pay it forward to my kids, to to build the best life that I can for my kids. So I get the feeling, like that guilt feeling in that kind of visceral way, but on a bigger scale or more philosophical lens, like what you're asking is, when we manifest things, we have this dream and we manifest it in a way that feels like it's not right, like we shouldn't have it or we shouldn't have it that easily. What I would say about experiencing guilt or shame or like a contraction when life or source or universe is like converging into creating a reality that you want is in doing that, then we're setting ourselves at odds with the life rhythm that's trying to be created for us. Like, all things happen for a reason. Death is inevitable. With your brother, death is inevitable, whether he dies in 3 days, 3 years, or 30. The legacy that he pays forward is generative, it's loving, it's kind, like, we just wanna do the best that we can with it. It's not up to us to decide how life creates on our behalf. It's up to us to decide how to translate that forward as powerfully and brilliantly and lovingly as possible. I don't think having those emotions or those experiences are wrong or bad or problematic. I think we're humans, so we have these moments where we're like, "Ooh, ooh, I didn't mean that I wanted my mom to die so I could have this thing, and I didn't mean that I wanted my, clients to leave so that I could start a new," like, we don't get to we're co-creating, yeah? So it's not like we can't be fully human and have the chaos of it all, but then it's up to us to decide how to grow it forward. 'Cause isn't life just trying to help us do that all the effing time?
All the time.
By contracting and creating problematic energy around it and, like, basically creating our own drama vortex around it, we're shutting down the thing that we wanted to manifest for us in the first place.
Totally. Because of the meaning that we create from this experience.
Yeah, totally. I can think we can over-meaning our experience into drama, which shuts down what we wanted in the first place. So, if we wanna manifest, and I think we're manifesting all the time. I think as humans, we are manifest, and life is just constantly unfolding before us with whatever's helping us grow forward. But if we shut that down because we say it's wrong, or it's not for us, then aren't we stifling the thing that we wanted in the first place? It's our job to create forward with it as the greatest legacy we can be in that moment.
Yeah. So good.
Does that answer your question? Does that help with the guilt?
Totally, totally. Because I think we can all go there, right? Like, if I had this where it was like, "Oh, like, I've got, some changes happening in my business," right? And I'm like, "Oh, did I set that off by, declaring something to the universe that I didn't think it would happen in this way?" Perhaps I did, who knows? But doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's what I understand now so completely is that absolutely everything is neutral. It's all neutral, and we as humans label it as good or bad or right or wrong or high vibe, low vibe, whatever you want to call it. It's all neutral. And so, can we be okay with that?
Yes. Honestly, I get up on a soapbox and, like, I'm gonna get all hot and hot off the tongue about this because it touches in on the philosophy of karma, this good, bad, and ugly and punishment and yes or no and all of these things, and I totally, totally resonate with what you're saying is it is neutral, and the idea of creating too much meaning around being the creator of the reality we're living gets really funky, right? Especially when we go through experiences that we're like, "I never would have chosen that. I didn't manifest that. I really like we've all been there, right? We never would have chosen. So I like to come in at it from this neutral angle, which is the only real karma or thing that I'm interested in being or supporting is being the translator of our reality. No matter what happens, like dream the dream, live your life with as much integrity, personal or energetic integrity as possible. And then as life happens, we are responsible for translating that as richly and as generatively as possible because shit happens. Parents die, divorces happen, death occurs.
Businesses collapse.
Yeah, the world collapses.
Totally. The world shuts down.
Yeah, exactly. We're still the slight edge. No matter what goes down, the only real thing is or that sounds like an ultimatum. The thing that I really believe in is that we are the translator of that forward. And how do we want to do that forward, regardless of what it is?
My goodness. Thank you so much.
You're gonna have to put me back in the box now.
Thank you so much for this conversation. I just think it's so, so valuable. And you always bring energy and life to conversations sometimes that people don't want to have or aren't willing to look at. So I appreciate that for sure in you and what you bring to the table. So yeah, this is amazing.
Thank you.
So if people want to connect with you, they resonate with what you're throwing down, they're picking up what you're throwing down, Sarah.
You're picking up what I'm putting down.
Where do they find you?
I am not that hard to find. I actually try and be hard to find. I think I do. I think I'm coming to that realization. I'm kind of a mystic in the woods sometimes. But in a worldly way, people can find me at saraspada.com. I get around on social media terribly, like I'm there, but my aspirations far exceed my actual my actual showing up. But I'd say come find me there or just DM me, and if people feel like they resonate with this and they want help or encouragement, or they just want to get into, dip a toe, that's the easiest way. I hold space for groups all the time around all these types of conversations. So I have like monthly gatherings that I do online, and it's an ever evolving landscape of conversations related to death and birth and awakening and conscious leadership and the cosmic soup. Saraspada.com. I'd say start there. That's at least like a worldly marker to come find me.
Yeah, and we'll put all of those things in the show notes so that everybody can connect. I, as I've already said, just I can't rave enough about your support, like outside of our friendship, like the intuitive nudge you give me, the insight that you share that I couldn't possibly try to navigate myself in regards to human design and numerology and astrology, like all of that piece. You're like an encyclopedia of that. So I am so incredibly grateful. And tarot, like that, I think that's how our friendship started on with tarot. Like how long ago was that? Oh my God.
That feels like forever, forever ago. Well, I'm as grateful for you, right? Like I just part of the laughing about me being off like in the woods somewhere is I just dig witnessing people like you who are like doing the things that you do and
Living life large. Awesome.
on the edge, off the edge.
So
Yeah.
good. So good.
Thanks, Michelle.
So thanks for hanging in here with me during this conversation, what can seem a little bit dramatic. But what I'm really taking out of this is something that Sara puts as considering how we can move through difficult experiences with our eyes, heart, and soul wide awake, so that evolution on the other side is just as rich as the experience itself. Many of us go through traumatic situations and experiences with our eyes closed, just trying to white knuckle it and push through. But when we can have our eyes, heart, and soul wide open, the evolution and the other side of that experience is incredible. Leaning into what is happening as it happens, both internally and in the world around us, and establishing a deep inner anchoring of the experiences are essential parts of healing and growing from loss and change. I love how Sara says, the legacy we want to build out of this and every past and future experience is essential for us to consider. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I would love for you to share this with your network on social media. And if you've got any questions, comments, feedback, or you want to be a guest on the Rich Life Revolution, hit me up in my DMs. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you got at least one gold nugget today. Be sure to grab your copy of the Rich Life Revolution workbook to help you set the foundation for your next level of wealthy. Get it now at richliferevolution.ca, and I'll see you later.